This is Ron Peters.
I'm John Nugent.
And I'm Sam Long.
Welcome to the After Class Podcast.
Because the best conversations happen
After Class.
Thanks for joining us. Another episode of the After Class Podcast. We're glad to have you along. A lot of things going on this week here at the college. And a lot of things soon to not go on, hopefully, for a week.
Exactly right.
Which is to say, we're about to start break for our week of outreach. That's all next week. So by the time this episode drops, we're going to be scattered to the four winds for at least a week or so. At least I will be. I'll be in South Carolina with the disc golf team. The college national championship. We'll be playing against the likes of, Michigan and Ohio State and Missouri and big schools. So that's where I'll be with them down there. Hopefully the weather will be nice. I think it's supposed to be 40s to 60s, which I'm not going to complain about.
Okay.
How do you expect to do in that? What are your expectations?
Not win. I think we'll compete. We're actually there are three divisions. We're in the third division, and I think we'll be okay. We won't probably win our division, but it'll be fun.
It will be fun no matter what.
For them.
It's in South Carolina, hopefully you're not going to be hopefully it's not going to be, like a drenching downpour like you had last time. So.
Correct. In North Carolina in the mountains. This is not there, so I think we'll be in better shape in that front.
Gotcha.
How about you, Ron?
I'm not really going anywhere. And I'll still be coming into the office off and on because I've got a paper to write for the Stone Campbell Journal Conference. Got a little bit of grading to do. But you know what? If I don't get in here till 11 or 12, no big deal. And I'm ready for a break. I just feel fatigued. And a lot of people do. I feel more fatigued this year than I have, I think, in the entire time I've been teaching. Maybe COVID was the worst. But I'm just ready for a break, and I think we need it because we come back and we'll have 1 month left. So we need to get ready for that final push.
Yeah, my break will be a lot like Ron's. Sticking local. My wife and I may take off and go to a hotel somewhere overnight or something like that, but we're planning on doing that, but we ended up going away earlier this week because we had a funeral for a friend's mother out of town. And so we kind of did the getaway at a hotel kind of thing. So we may or may not do it again later this week. But I have a writing project. I'm doing a book review of N.T. Wright and Michael Bird's, I believe, Jesus and the Powers. I think it's what they call that book. It's a review that needs to be written.
It needs to be written.
Because it's got a thesis that needs to be challenged articulately.
Yeah.
And so I already have an online publisher who wants to publish my review. And so that's what I'll be doing constructively besides resting. And hopefully quality time with the grandkid.
Oh, yeah, for us it'll be the same. Like Suzanne and I want to take one day where we just get away and do something.
Yeah.
So we'll do the same thing. Yeah. But so a guy like, it's intriguing because, a highly respected New Testament scholar like N.T. Wright, and Michael Bird is up there as well. He's a New Testament scholar. I think these people get a lot of respect, and we have respected them for their work. So for you to stand up and say, love you, Tom, but I'm going to have to call you out on this one. That's a big deal.
Yeah, on this one. I own almost every book he's written. My N.T. Wright collection is vast because I've learned a tremendous amount from him.
Yeah.
When he gets into ecclesiology, church-state relations, I'm sorry. The exegetical sharpness goes down.
Yeah.
So anyway.
We'll wait for that. We want to expose too much. But,
Okay, make the listeners wait.
But the reason why I think we've felt a lot of fatigue going into this break is we just got over our HLC visit.
I agree.
And we had Great Lakes was up for an accreditation review with the Higher Learning Commission, and there's a lot riding on it. We've been on probation for a couple of years, mostly because of financial reasons. And this was the visit where they came to check us out and make sure we turn things around. And indeed we have. So
big time.
It was a really good visit, but there was lots of meetings. I mean, all of us, I know, between the three of us combined, we were probably in 12 meetings.
Yeah.
There were a lot of questions being asked. They were doing a kind of comprehensive look at every aspect of the college life, including the education and campus life and such like that. But we had a great visit. There was lots of sharp questions, and I think our team did a fantastic job. The team left us feeling optimistic.
Yes.
But we have to wait a while before we get an official word on their report to the Higher Learning Commission. And then in July and August, we'll get to go to Chicago, some of us, to go before the actual board to confirm the verdict that they give us. And then whatever it is will be official in November when the board meets to confirm what the higher commission has decided based on this team's evidence. But this week was like the week. In the past month, we've been really working hard to get all the data together for them.
Yeah.
And but we all feel like it went really well. And the team, there are lots of smiles and handshakes.
I'm glad to hear that.
And they didn't leave like with their head down saying, "Oh man, we've got bad news for these people." No, we have every reason to think it went really well. But
Yeah.
there's no official word until there's an official word.
That's right.
When there is, we will let you know.
Yeah.
Right.
Thanks, everyone, for your prayers for that. For those of you who knew what was going on.
Yeah.
And we appreciate that for sure.
I think it's one of those things. I don't think I realized how much we were working and how much stress we were under until it was over. Like, it just feels like work. And, Frank's had us doing a lot of good stuff, and it's great. I appreciate Frank and the serious, nature he had. I'm not saying it right, but he brought a lot of seriousness to the process. And I was happy to do the work to get ready. I think when we got to the end, it's like, oh, wow, we were working hard. And I didn't do as much as the VPs. Like, you guys were, really working hard, and Sam and I contributed our parts. But you get out from underneath it, and it's like, oh, yeah, that was a lot of pressure. And so I think you're right. That's probably why we're ready for a break.
Yeah. So here on the podcast, though,
Yeah,
we do not take a break.
Not at all.
we tried.
We almost had to take a break. I was almost going to be out of town today as well. But we were able to pull it off, and we're going to continue our series on creation care or something like that, what the Bible says about inanimate creation, the land, the trees, the plant life, and such.
Yep.
And the last couple episodes, we got through Genesis 1 through 11, which had a lot of foundational material, talking about the importance and the goodness of creation, the responsibility of God's people to be caretakers of that creation, how sin has really impacted negatively the creation itself and the human's relationship to creation, and how in the stories after the fall, we see this negative consequences of sin that God anticipated in Genesis 3 unfold in the life of Cain, and how the violence of Cain and the violence of later human civilization corrupted the earth, soiled the earth with bloodshed and wickedness, so much so that the whole world had to be flooded. And so destruction came upon much of inanimate creation like it had never seen or experienced before. And it was always so interesting in that whole section how much, the author of Genesis is saying, and I'm never going, speaking for God, I'm never going to do this to creation again on account of human sinfulness.
Yeah.
Like, man, creation took a big hit, and it was our fault. And God is making his commitment. He's never going to do that again. He's going to find some other plan to deal with human sinfulness besides destroying the whole earth on account of us.
Yep. And that's a big commitment on God's part. I appreciate that. That reveals God's character. On the one hand, he loves his creation so much that he will do whatever he thinks is necessary to try to correct the situation. But after the flood, he's like, that's a one and done. I just can't do this again. And so it also speaks to his love of his creation. It's like, I can't subject him to this. I got to find a different solution, which obviously opens up, the path for Abraham, Israel, and ultimately Jesus.
Yeah. And one of the things we observed is that the story of Genesis 1 through 9 is not just a story of humans and God.
Yeah.
It's
agreed.
humans and God and creation.
Yeah.
And the animals are also in the mix, but inanimate creation plays a pretty significant role. Well, then the big thing happens. What is God's solution to dealing with human wickedness without flooding the earth every time things get really bad? He decides to call a set-apart people, right? He's going to form through Abraham's descendants. We get this in Genesis 12, 1-3, a people that God will multiply and prosper and bless and bring to a land. And once he does that he's going to use these people to be a blessing to all nations.
Yeah.
Right? And the rest of Genesis tells the story of how Abraham's descendants grew and multiplied, and eventually they found themselves in Egypt for 400 years, and then God brings them out through Moses, and now they're a numerous people, and he's ready to take them into the promised land where he's going to show them how to be a blessing. And he, while they're up on Mount Sinai, reveals to them the law, the instructions. And in these instructions, it's really like the blueprint for Israel's life together.
Yeah.
Right? We get to see in these instructions God's care for the land. Like, how is he going to use his set-apart people to be a witness and a role model to the rest of the nations about what proper land management looks like?
Yeah.
And so
Agreed.
that's where we're going to kind of enter into the story is they're on the mountain in Exodus 23, and God is revealing the law, and Sam's got some passages to read.
Yeah, we're going to start in Exodus 23, and then I'm going to do a parallel passage in Leviticus 25. But starting in 23, verse 10, it says, "For 6 years you shall sow your field and gather in its yield. But the 7th year you shall let it rest and lie fallow, so the poor of your people may eat, and what they leave the wild animals may eat. You shall do the same with your vineyard and with your olive orchard." And the next verse talks about the Sabbath day specifically, and talks a little bit more about the animals. But the first part is specifically about the land. Then you turn over to 25 of Leviticus, chapter 25, starting verse 2. It talks more about the sabbatical year. It says, 6 years you shall sow your field, 6 years you shall prune your vineyard and gather in their yield. But in the 7th year there shall be a Sabbath of complete rest for the land, a Sabbath for Yahweh, for the Lord. You shall not sow your field or prune your vineyard. You shall not reap the aftergrowth of your harvest or gather the grapes of your unpruned vine. It shall be year of complete rest for the land. You may eat what the land yields during its Sabbath, you and a bunch of people in your house. But for the wild animals in your land, it will all yield. It shall be food for you. And so what it's saying is this is mind-boggling to people who don't have preservation techniques of food. That you eat or you grow things for 6 years, and you spend a whole year with no food growing, like specifically. Like, so you would let your garden, right? You may or may not till it under at the end of the year, and you just leave it there, and then whatever comes up, right? Yeah, and you're not doing a lot of replanting, you're not doing any fertilizing. It's just, it is what it is. And the implication is what would have happened in the previous year and what will come up during the year is going to be from God and is going to be sufficient, not just for you, but for poor people in your midst who don't have any field to do anything with to come eat, and for the wild animals as well. And this is I don't think we take seriously how miraculous this would have been and what God would have had to done to make this work, which is why they probably never did it. But that's a whole other aside, right? Imagine telling a farmer, like, you're not going to plant anything this year. Like, well, then we're going to starve, right? And we're gonna empty our bank accounts, and there's gonna be nothing left because we're not gonna have anything to show for this year. And for a lot of farmers who live on a margin, that would just it'd be crazy to tell them that.
Yeah. This is something I've always wondered, and I don't know the answer. I'm asking this because I want clarification on it. But let's say you're a farmer and you have a decent amount of property under your care. Could you divide that property into sevens and rotate through that so that every year some portion of your property is getting its Sabbath rest, rather than being every 7 years everything just goes fallow? You're like, yeah, I have property. Every year something is going fallow, but not everything is going fallow. Is that like a bad loophole, or would that be a legitimate way of thinking about it?
That wouldn't have worked within the confines of Torah.
Okay, that's fine. That's fine. I was just kind of curious about
the premise is that God will bless them. This is what it says in other passages we haven't read. God's going to bless them so much in year 6, right? And because your solution helps the land rest, but the people are still having to work the sections.
Right,
so
yeah.
like part of the reason for the rest is people get to rest, and especially servants or aliens in the land that can't be landowners, and so they become workers of the field. They do some of the most menial labor, and then animals are used as farming equipment, right? Because they don't have tractors, and so it's a rest for people, it's a rest for animals, and it's a rest for the land itself.
Yeah.
And God's going to so bless it in year 6 that there would be plenty to carry over into the next year. Now, you said it never happened. What makes you say it never happened?
Well, I suppose I don't know of any recording of it happening in history, for one. But also part of what God says during the exile is, like, you didn't keep Sabbath, you didn't keep Jubilee, so I'm going to force you to. You're not going to be in the land, and it's going to lie fallow for all those years it should have, right? And so there's a theological component too. But also, like, it just seems like they never did.
Yeah. It's like as soon as they got into the land, they immediately dumped Torah.
Right.
So, why would they keep this?
Yeah.
Which is one of the hardest parts of Torah to keep.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They can't even, like, not look sideward at a Baal, idol. But do you think they're going to not plan for the 7th year? Forget about it.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I really love this. These are the kind of passages I try to point out to people, because I think it really does reveal God's love for his creation beyond humanity. Sometimes people, and even Christians, especially Christians, can be very, anthropocentric, where all that really matters is humanity, and that's all God really cares about. And passages like this reveal God's love for all of his creation. And, I love the fact that Sabbath is important to God. He's like, yeah, once every 7 days, you need rest. Take a day off. How about the land? Well, I mean, even go back to like the Sabbath. He says like your animal's supposed to get the day off, and your, children and your slaves, all that. And so, okay, animals get Sabbath. But this idea of the land getting Sabbath, getting a year off, I love this because it shows that these are things that matter to God. And instead of being legalistic about it, it's like, all right, we got to give things a rest, to say, how can I be more like God? This should inspire me to think in a God-like way, to say, if God cares so much about the land, how can I be like God in caring about the land and caring about my animals and stuff like that? And so I love having conversations around these passages because it creates that kind of mindset that hopefully will lead us into a more godly way of looking at the world around us.
Yeah, your loophole, I mean, has value in the sense from a farmer's perspective,
Right.
right? And that means it's good practice to not constantly take all the nutrients out of the soil and rotate your fields,
Right, yeah.
right? But from a Torah perspective, like that misses the point, right?
Yeah, and that's kind of what I was. That's what I figured, but I wanted to. I could see
Put it
somebody
out
out
there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I could see somebody out there going, "Well, yeah, I know how to fix this."
Yeah, that's what I do
Like-
right now. I mean, good
Yeah.
farmers do that anyway.
Yeah,
right?
I mean, I see it all around me.
Yeah.
Farmers rotating their crops because they want to keep the soil nutrients, balanced. But yeah, it doesn't really capture everything that God is trying to say to his people.
In any of your studies, Sam, did you run across were other cultures doing this sort of thing that you know of?
Not that I know of. I think it would be surprising if they did for multiple reasons. Mostly because for a lot of cultures, 7 was not a great number, and so they like I don't know, taking the 7th year off and expecting blessing would not have necessarily worked. But I think that would have been in the same way that Sabbath was not a thing. The Sabbath day, like no, you work every day because you got to keep up on stuff, and so I think this whole concept would have been very new and surprising to them.
Yeah. I think the reason why we read the Exodus and the Leviticus, because the Exodus passage talks about this Sabbath year, but mostly in terms of the animals and the poor getting to rest. But the Leviticus one just makes clear, no, this is for the land too.
Yeah.
Like there's something about that rest that is good for the land that cares for it. And so this is hardwired into Israel's calendar. There's at least one day every week where no one's going to work and the land's not going to get worked and the animals aren't going to have to work. And there's at least 1 year every 7 years, and of course the Jubilee year where they do it 2 years in a row.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
So this shows God wants his people to exemplify concern for the land that they work.
Yeah.
And to recognize the produce of the land as a gift from God.
Amen. Yeah.
And that's part of what this only is made possible by God's blessing, and the fact that God, had they followed Torah, would have blessed their socks off in year 6, so much so that they could last all the way through year 7 without starving, would have been just a regular reminder, like at least once a decade, that it's all God's.
Yeah.
And we are just so much in this land as stewards of his land. And we don't have that passage in here, but, in Torah it says that the Israelites are like aliens and exiles in their own land because the land belongs to God.
Right. Yeah.
And he provides for it, and so they don't overwork his soil. And that would have been, I think, you're right, Sam. I don't recall any other nation doing anything quite this bold or having that as a part of their legislation. It would have been a significant witness.
But it's all based on the system that's set up here in Torah is blessing is from God when you keep Torah. Like, you'll see. Just keep it. It'll be enough. And they could never accept that it would be enough.
Yeah.
There's always hedging bets and all the other things that go along with it. You brought up a passage that's the next one I think we're going to look at.
Oh, it is?
I think it is.
So one more thing I want to put in here.
I mean,
just before
it's
we
fine.
jump-
Oh, whatever, Ron.
Yeah, whatever. I think this also speaks to the fact that we don't live in a world that is completely corrupted. Like God is saying, look back at creation. Creation should inform the kinds of instructions that I'm giving you as a people, because there's still goodness from that creation that exists in the world. That's like, this isn't a world that's completely broken, but there is that I don't even want to call it an echo. It's just there's still goodness here that you can experience if you will just listen to me and apply the things that I'm saying to you. And so, yeah, I think it challenges the notion that we're just living in a broken world where nothing matters anymore. I don't think his instructions reflect that kind of attitude towards the land.
Yeah. I mean, I see it kind of a couple ways. On the one hand, the consequences of the fall are not complete, right?
Yeah.
Total. On the other hand, it could also say that God's overcoming those consequences when you keep Torah, right? So, I mean, I could see it kind of going either way. Like, maybe it is completely broken, but God overcomes it when we're faithful.
I see it as a both and.
Yeah.
I think that there is this goodness in the creation that hasn't been totally wiped out, that following God's instructions allows you to experience. In that context, though, I think you're right. God still says, I am going to bless you. I'm going to take care of you. You've got to trust me that I'm going to make things work for you. And so I don't want to eliminate that. Like I said, I think it's more of a both and than an either or for me.
Yeah. And this Sabbath day and this Sabbath year and Jubilee, it's kind of like a little morsel of what life would have been like in the garden before the fall.
Yeah.
Everyone's not working by the sweat of their brow every day.
Right,
the
yeah.
animals, the children, everyone's just work is enjoyable. It's
Right.
less onerous.
Yeah.
Right, yeah.
And that's built into their life rhythm. And it's
Yeah.
kind of like it's an echo of what once was, and we'll see in the prophets kind of a foretaste of what will be again someday
Yep.
in the new heavens and new
Yep.
earth.
Right.
So maybe we'll get there this week.
No chance.
So yeah, I blew it on the next passage. It's pretty much
You previewed it
yeah, that's right. And, and
Ron
you did
can
a
finish
great segue to it.
until Ron ruined it. That's
Until I
fine.
ruined it.
Classic
I know,
Ron.
right? That's
So fine. That's
classic
fine.
Ron move. So yeah, I guess we're at for the reading. So we're just flipping a page over to Leviticus 26.
25, 23.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, right. We didn't read that part.
Same page, same chapter.
Still same page, right? Yeah. No, I got to flip back one page to get to 25, 23. Leviticus 25, 23 says, "The land shall not be sold in perpetuity, for the land is mine. With me, you are but aliens and tenants." So yeah, John had already kind of alluded to that, but it's a different way of viewing the land. It's like once they get in there, and especially generation after generation of living in Israel, the families can just begin to assume, hey, this is our property. It's ours to do with as we please, instead of having a more tenant mentality to say, this has never been our land in the first place. We're grateful. Thank you, God, for creating this opportunity for us and giving us this land. But we still treat it as if it's your property. We can't abuse it. We can't exploit it. To do so would be to disrespect the very God who brought us here in the first place. And so this mindset should just permeate every relationship they have with the land that they're working.
Yeah. And one of the big principles, and maybe you said it while I was looking ahead, it's like the land is not for the wealthy to hoard.
Yeah, right.
Like one person can't just get a hold of the land and buy others' land off of them and then just keep it forever. No, it's going to be reset. It's going to go back. You don't get to have it.
Right.
It's God's. It's not anyone's to kind of have total access to, which means the land is for everyone.
Yeah.
It's not just for the rich to get richer. It's for everyone to have a share and everyone to have a piece and access to it. So that, we talked about the original design that when they went ahead and built cities, it was the beginning of civilization of people who don't have land.
Mm-hmm.
And here you have in Torah, God sets up a vision of life where everyone has land and everyone has soil that they're going to be in relationship with, which is pretty cool.
It is cool. I agree.
Yeah. All right. Ready to move on to chapter 26? Or did you have something to say?
Yeah, it's an aside. We can move on.
All right. Fair enough.
It's okay. I'll create a sermon about it at some point.
Oh, if it's sermon worthy, should we hear it?
No, I don't know. It's not formed
you
yet.
teased
It's not-
us on it there.
Oh,
So.
it's
Yeah,
fine.
everyone wants to know now.
Oh, it's going to suck. And they're like, why did we waste our time with this? You set me up for failure. Fine, here we go. Just the idea of, property being sort of a microcosm of our world is that we think everything is ours and we're so close-fisted about everything. And we're just caretakers of these things that God has given us. And we say that at church a lot. We don't really think about it, right? And this is the promised land. Right? This isn't just some random land. This is the promised land that the Israelites have been looking forward to, seeing the fulfillment of Abraham. They get on the cusp of, and God says, "Oh, by the way, it's not yours, right? It's mine. You're just you're aliens in my land." And that's not how it's portrayed, I think, in the church. And we tell the history of it. It's these people got their land, right? That yes, God gave it to them, but God gave it to them. And so it's theirs and their families forever. And he says, no, it's not. It's still mine. And, like that's why you can't sell it, because it doesn't belong to you. It belongs to me. Anyway, so that mentality is so foreign to us that it would be fun to sort of trace that concept a little different way, and what land meant to them, our stuff means to us. And if we really treated our stuff as God's, we would treat it differently.
Yeah, that does segue very nicely to this next passage.
Kill that.
Because it's going to talk about these blessings for obedience and penalties for disobedience. Like part of the thing built into this is that the land is not Israel's, it's God's, and God reserves the right to drive them out of it and claim it back.
Yeah.
Like they've got it on loan from him, and he can withdraw the loan. He can cancel the loan anytime.
Right.
But he's not going to do it unless they cancel it by their disobedience. And so, this pushes hard against Zionist theology.
It does.
And people who have a certain view of Israel's claim on the land, and Israel being a very elastic term to cover all political entities called Israel.
Right, yeah.
If that annoyed you, we have a whole series on what the word Israel means.
Yeah.
You need to go back and listen to it.
Right, I agree.
Leviticus 26. I think this is what Ron was going to read.
It was. I didn't realize I skipped over verse.
Beginning in verse 3, and we have a few chunks here. I'll start in verse 3.
You don't need to make fun of my weight.
We got a few chunks here. Here we go, verse 3. If you follow my statutes and keep my commandments and observe them faithfully, I will give you your rains in their season, and the land shall yield its produce, and the trees of the field shall yield their fruit. Your threshing shall overlap the vintage, and the vintage shall overlap the sowing. You shall eat your bread to the full, and live securely in your land. And I will grant you peace in the land, and you shall lie down, and no one shall make you afraid. I will remove dangerous animals from the land, and no sword shall go through the land. And then skipping ahead to verse 14, but if you will not obey me and do not observe all these commandments, if you spurn my statutes and abhor my ordinances, so that you will not observe all my commandments and you break my covenant, I in turn will do this to you. I will bring terror on you, consumption and fever that waste the eyes and cause life to pine away. You shall sow your seed in vain, for your enemies shall eat it. I will set my face against you, and you shall be struck down by your enemies. Your foes shall rule over you, and you shall flee, though no one pursues you. I've got several more. Okay. And if in spite of this you will not obey me, I will continue to punish you sevenfold for your sins. I will break your proud glory, and I will make your sky like iron and your earth like copper. Your strength shall be spent to no purpose. Your land shall not yield its produce, and the trees of the land shall not yield their fruit. One more verse, skipping ahead to 34. Then the land, and so this is, I guess if we go forward, maybe I will go to verse 33. This is ongoing punishment. And I will scatter you among the nations, and I will unsheath the sword against you. Your land shall be a desolation, and your cities a waste. Then, in verse 34, the land shall enjoy its Sabbath years, as long as it lies desolate, while you are in the land of your enemies. Then the land shall rest and enjoy its Sabbath years. A lot going on there.
Yup. We got all sorts of, starting with, it's all built on them keeping the covenant, right?
Yeah.
The statutes and the commandments found within the covenant. If you do that, things would go great for you. It's like we tell our kids, if you just listen to me, it'll be a lot better for you. But as stubborn children are, and stubborn Israelites are, we don't. But if you just do that, and he gives up all these really great things, and so to a fertility-focused people, this is exactly what they want to hear.
Oh yeah,
right. Where the rain is going to rain. Of course, they want rain, and it's going to be so much rain, and the crops are going to so greatly that that they're going to have more than they have to do with. And like even the prophets will probably actually foreshadow this, but like the they're going to be still harvesting, and it's time to plant again. Like they have so much, they don't have time. Like, and so like this big circle.
I love how it overtakes it.
Yeah. And like that's what he says here is that's exactly what's going to happen. It's just you're gonna have so much, you're not gonna know what to do with it. Yeah. If only you obey. And we won't. No spoiler alert, but they don't. But
they don't obey
very
well. Yeah. Well, it's you were saying these are agrarian people for whom farming is overwhelmingly the primary way of life for them. It's not just you're going to have so much rain, but you're going to have just the right amount of rain.
Right.
You're going to get enough rain, and you get frequent enough rain that your plants are going to be so well watered, because like too much rain is the
Right.
worst as well. It can just wash everything away and kill everything. And so God's like, I'm gonna manage this for you. You know, and I think about like when they would begin worshiping Baals and stuff like that. It's like they're hedging their bets. It's like, okay, we know Yahweh said this, but just in case,
Yep.
Baal is supposed to be the sky, storm god.
Yeah.
And so we'll just make sure we take care of him too, so that we're like hedging all of our bets. And God's like, that's not trusting me. You're not putting all your trust in me. I need you to trust me solely, exclusively. And if you want to try to put your trust in Baal, fine. Let's just see how that works for you, because it's all or nothing. And fine, go worship your Baals. But it goes really bad for them. In fact, it's so bad that, sorry, I lost my train of thought there. It goes so bad for them that they get their harvest in, but the enemies come in, they take it, haul it all the way. It's like, yep, that God could not protect you enough. Maybe you even got a harvest, but somebody else is going to come in and rob it from you. And now you have less than you had before. So
Yeah, I was just talking about Gideon and the Midianites, and that's exactly what was happening in
Yeah.
the book of Judges, chapter 6 to 9, where the Midianites kept coming in and stealing all their stuff. And so Gideon's like, in a vineyard, in a wine press, threshing out wheat, which is not where that's supposed to happen, right?
Right,
So
yeah.
these ideas of that. So.
yeah.
So what do you think? This chapter has to do with us and our thoughts about land, like a Christian theology of land.
Well, it's tough because I don't know that we have the exact same promise. I think there's specific things tied to it, land specifically. At the same time, I think there's an expectation if we were to live a certain kind of life, we might have better relationship with the ground than we do. Like if we were not polluting it, we wouldn't have such problems with other things. And it's not a one-to-one correlation, but I see that as being sort of an application from it. I don't think, obviously, that's not what God's saying here, but there's definitely this expectation of there's a certain way of living that produces a higher yield, and it has nothing to do with fertilization and
Yeah.
things like that. It's just there's an ethical aspect to the land that we often ignore.
I think that one of the things that I think about all the time as, a farmer is that you have to kind of love the land and you have to love the plants for their own sake. It's not just how do I maximize the yield so I can get as much out of this as I can. There's a sense in which it's like, no, I'm going to love this land. I'm going to love the plants that I have put in because I just want them to do well. God loves his creation. And so I want to love his creation. And so, fertilizing and pruning and doing all these things, it's not just so that I can get something out of it. But there's a kind of love that you have for them that extends to a kind of care just because I think that you're good and love-worthy in and of your own sake. Now, granted, we do get the benefit of it. We do get the fruitfulness of the land. But I don't think fruitfulness can be like the ultimate goal. Fruitfulness has to be a byproduct that grows out of the love that you have in the first place.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it is kind of, it shows us Israel kind of caught between Eden, which they've lost,
Mm-hmm.
and they're supposed to somehow, at least every once in a while, experience this Eden-like abundance.
Yeah.
And if they want that to be their regular life rhythm, they need to keep Torah.
Yeah.
And that's a foretaste of the fullness of the kingdom to come. And, it's the problem with kind of applying this, I think it's kind of what you were getting at, Sam, is that they disobeyed the Torah, they broke the
Right.
Torah, they were driven from the land.
Mm-hmm.
And they never got it back fully, right? I
Right.
mean, they got back to the land, several people after the exile, but they were still under Persian occupation, and then the Greeks, then the Romans. And so, they never really had control of their land like they did going into it,
Yeah,
right? They never reclaimed it once the exile began in 586 or 596, the first wave. So, we live in that period after God's people's identity is linked with this promised land, and the gospel has created trans-ethnic, trans-territorial communities who are scattered across the globe, and so we're not really in direct relationship to these promises,
Right.
or these cursings for that matter. And I think the closest thing you get is in the scriptures, it talks about, seek first God's kingdom and all these things will be added to you. Like there is a connection between if we prioritize God's kingdom in our life with our time, energy, and resources, then God will take care of our needs, our clothing, our food, our housing, etc. But we can't we can't turn that into kind of a health and wealth kind of
Right.
prosperity. So if you're a Christian farmer, you're going to get more out of your land than if you're your neighbor next door, right, who's not a
Right.
believer. That kind of promises doesn't carry through in a literal way.
I think one of the challenges people face is, so many people just aren't connected to the land. It's like people are not farmers anymore. And it's a fairly recent development. If you study history, it's only been since the Industrial Revolution that you've had this massive shift away from people living on farms and moving into cities and doing these kinds of things. And so I think a lot of people are like, I don't even know how to apply this because I'm not growing food. I can go to the store, I can buy food, and that seems to be taken care of. But there's still people out there, and I'm in a small way, I put myself in this category, who are trying to live that life. I want to live close to the land, and I want to grow food, and I want to be a more direct part of that process. And it's not just for me, but it's also having an abundance to share. You guys sometimes get the benefit of that.
Oh, yeah.
I get to bring stuff to you guys, and I love being able to.
Yes, we do.
Yeah, I love being able to share that. And so for me, this really hits home. I'm always asking myself questions. How do I learn from this? And again, I'm not necessarily having like Sabbath years and things like that, but it doesn't mean that I can't learn from it. As I'm growing things and interacting, I want to have that same mentality that God wanted Israel to have. Not in an over-literalistic way, but I want to learn from it to say, you know what, God, I'm loving your creation. And, I am trusting you. This is something I was thinking about earlier. It's like, I look at the land that my family owns. We have a lot of farmland, and we own it. The state of Michigan recognizes that and everything.
Do they?
They recognize our
For now.
for now, exactly. But in a generic sense, they recognize our ownership of the land. But how can I approach that land and say, you know what? I still see myself as a tenant. Ultimately, God, you are the one who owns this. Just as Israel was tenants on God's land, how do I approach the land as your property? And if ever God says, Ron or Peter's family or whatever, I've got somebody else I want to move in here. Fits into my bigger plan. There's something I want to do here. Am I going to fight God on it? It's like, no, this is my land. Or would I say, oh, this hurts, but okay, God, if that's what you want to do.
Yeah.
That's a hard question to wrestle with.
Yeah. There's another element to this passage I think we haven't talked as much about, and that is when they go into exile, the land is going to get its rest anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It kind of reminds me of the fall. Like, humans' violence has screwed things up for the planet, and at the end of the day, God's never going to hurt the planet again just because of us. And it's like, the Israelites, you've been given this land to care for. I've given you instructions on how to care for it, and I've given you all sorts of other things to do in the land. If you're going to do that, I'm going to kick you out of the land, and then the land's going to get the rest that you wouldn't give it.
Yeah.
So there's still that concern for the land that God has, independent of his people.
Yeah, like God's prioritizing the rest of the land over the comfortability of his people, which is a nice way of saying they're going into exile and all the things that will happen in there. Like, that's not normally how we view things. Typically, we're the pinnacle of creation, and we're first, right? Yeah. It seems to be like God said, no, the land, because it's an indicator of whether they're keeping Torah, right? If it needs it, then it shows that they're not actually living out what they're supposed to. When we were reading 14 through 20 or so, it actually kind of reminded me of the parable of the talents, where I'm giving you this, make good use of it. If you screw it up, I'm going to take it away and give it away to someone else who deserves it.
Yep.
Yeah.
And that's kind of like what I get from that sort of idea. You've screwed it up, you lose it.
Yeah, it does remind me after the flood where he says, he's not going to flood the earth again. He's like, all these seed time and harvest will continue until the end, right? And generations of people come and go.
Yeah.
But, Mount Zion, that land, that hill is still there, all these millennia. And God has a big picture view of things, and he will protect his land from his people. Yeah. And that's just something to be aware of. God's a little jealous for his property, and we have to keep that in perspective.
Yeah. Well, and you see that, again, I think that's Jesus' parable is like another one is, the parable of the vineyard, where a man, he builds a vineyard, puts a
right.
wall around a tower, and then leases it out. And he's just, Jesus is saying to the Israelites, this should have been your attitude, but now you think you own the land. Guess what? The owner's going to come back and he's going to take his land back. And so that's his indictment.
Mm-hmm.
You have not listened to something that goes all the way back to the law that I gave you. And now you're going to have to deal with the consequences of that.
Yeah. We turn to Deuteronomy. It's a very similar, actually, sentiment. We'll read it, and probably not a ton of commentary on it, but I actually kind of like how the way some of the description of the land is. So it's Deuteronomy chapter 8, starting verse 6. Therefore, keep the commandments of the Lord your God by walking in his ways and by fearing him. Sounds familiar.
Yeah.
For the Lord your God is bringing you to a good land, a land with flowing streams, with springs and underground waters welling up in the valleys and hills, a land of wheat and barley, of vines and fig trees and pomegranates, a land of olive trees and honey, a land where you may eat bread without scarcity, where you will lack nothing, a land whose stones are iron and from whose hills you may mine copper. You shall eat your fill and bless the Lord your God for the good land that he has given you. And so I just like the way it's framed. Like this is what's being promised to them, which is true and not true. It's not as lush as lots of other places in the ancient world, but the implication is God's going to make it so.
Yeah.
God's going to provide a special blessing upon this kind of scraggly land, but that they're going to have so much, like they're going to eat bread without scarcity. Like they're not going to be scrounging around for any grain they can find. They're going to have more bread than they know what to do with. Kind of like the manna, except it doesn't go bad. Well, it does go bad. It's not on the next day.
Right. No, I think you make a good point because it emphasizes God's role in the process. You can't just say this is a good land that's giving us good food, like the Nile or the Tigris and Euphrates. It's like it is a kind of a scrawny land, but God's going to intervene in such a way as to make it more fruitful than it would otherwise be. And that's just God's way of doing things. He always wants to do things in a way that people are like, this is not natural. It must be God.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh, one more.
All right.
Yep.
Straight out of Torah.
Last passage from Torah.
Yeah. Deuteronomy 20, verses 19 through 20. We read, if you besiege a town for a long time, making war against it in order to take it, you must not destroy its trees by wielding an axe against them. Although you may take food from them, you must not cut them down. Are trees in the field human beings that they should come under the siege from you? You may destroy only the trees that you know do not produce food. You may cut them down for use in building siege works against a town that you make war with until it falls. That's interesting. It's like, are trees people? That's really great. But again, he's like, fruit-bearing trees are not to be used this way. They're good for food. Get food off of them. Go eat the food that comes off them, but don't cut them down and use them to lay siege. Take those other trees that don't bear fruit, use them for that purpose. And it's just a great perspective. Those apple trees, just let them make apples. So I like it.
Yeah, it starts more kind of land-centric and it kind of ends more human-centric.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like, like as long as the tree's not giving fruit, well, then you can hack it down.
Right.
But like that little slogan, like, what have the trees done to you? Like,
yeah, right.
they're not people that just, you don't take out your wrath on other nations and cities on the trees around that
Yeah.
land. Like, you have to think about the big picture. Like, it's going to take a long time for this forest to grow back.
Yep.
And this forest is doing a lot of good work for the people who live in this area.
Yeah.
And so you're not only thinking of the trees themselves, which take a long time to grow back, but you're thinking about after this war is over, there's still going to be people around here who need to eat from those trees.
Yep.
And so just taking the long view.
Right.
And that's what I like about this passage. It's kind of like, from the beginning, we've been kind of interdependent with creation, right? And this is a passage just saying, don't for like a short-sighted goal, and maybe this is like a principle, right? For a short-sighted goal, winning this particular battle against this particular city, do not, lay waste a forest.
Yeah.
Because the people of this area have a relationship with this, and they need each other, and you got to take care of this thing.
Yeah, but it's just like, it's smart. Like, if this is going to be your land, why would you destroy everything?
Yeah.
And this goes to also the quote conquest from Joshua. People act like they destroyed everything. No, they didn't. They're going to be moving into these houses and these villages soon. Why would they destroy it and have to redo their work? And the same with the food. Like, not only is it stupid to cut down a food source that takes years and years to grow back again, but like you're also doing it to something that's not yours anyway. It's God's. And so there's like these multiple sort of layers to why they shouldn't do it.
And I think that's how they show that they're a wise people. one of the things that God wants to reveal through Israel is that these people are wise. And so, like, these foreign nations will look at them and go, man, these people are wise. They don't cut down fruit-bearing trees. That was really smart. And so just even things like this show the kind of wisdom that they get from listening to God's instructions.
Yeah. And so it may be good practice today to think about, think down the road. Yeah, we want to build an apartment complex here, but think of the role that this forest has for this community.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
That it's had for a long time. And we can't keep doing this indefinitely without running out of trees.
Yep.
Yeah. Don't pave paradise and put up a parking lot.
Amen.
Amy Grant.
Nope.
That's not
Yeah.
Amy Grant.
No.
Yes.
That was a secular.
Yeah.
I'm trying to remember who it was. Maybe I'm not saying Amy didn't say that. but
Really?
I'm
Yeah.
thinking of a
Maybe it was a cover. She made
Had
a
to be
cover.
a cover.
Okay.
Why are
maybe
we
that was-
getting? I know Counting Crows and Michelle Branch did a cover later, but it was done by someone else. I can't remember who it was that did it first.
I know. Now I'm gonna have to
Definitely an
look it
Amy Grant song.
up. Okay. I'll
Look it
take
up.
your word for it.
Huh.
Fact check us, people.
Yeah, let us know
Let
if
us
you
know
know
what's
what
going
he's talking about, because Ron and I
Yeah,
don't.
we are a little confused on that.
That's
one.
cool.
All right. Well, we're going to wrap up this episode.
Amen.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of the After Class podcast. After Class because
The best conversations happen.
After class.
Thank you again for listening to the Afterclass podcast. ACP is hosted by Sam Long, John Nugent, and Ron Peters. Audio production is provided by Drew Nyquist, and social media is managed by Darren Harris.